So I have been wanting to see this pilot, which was made for the Fox Network, for a very long time. I used to be a really big Boondocks fan as the comic strip. That's how I knew it. And so I want you to know, if you're watching this, that I'm coming at this as a fan of the comic strip. That was where my entry point was. So I wasn't like, oh, I got into the cartoon and then I was aware there was a comic strip. That's where I was coming from with it. However, I think that sort of works into what this is, because this was lost for all this time, finally released. It was supposedly, when they were doing this at Fox, it didn't work out. It looked like there wasn't going to be a Boondock show. Then Adult Swim figured it out, and it looks like a pilot of, like, before what would eventually become Boondocks and the pilot and stuff. And it seems like the real difference is that I don't think they wrote a real show. They wrote segments. Like, this is far more My Neighbor the Yamadas than it is an actual TV show. This started off with, like, them obviously watching, like, the Parkers, I'm pretty sure. Whatever they give it some other name or something. And so Huey and Riley are watching TV, and they're watching the Parkers, and he says he really likes the Parkers. He's insulted by him, but then it, like, moves on to, like, they're going to school. The grandpa explains the whole, like, he bought the house thing with their savings, which is directly in the actual first episode. There's a lot of things, like grandpa working out to the infomercial of Billy Blank's. I forget if he's naked in the first episode, which I just watched actually, but he gets naked in the pilot. But each of these things feels like a segment, like a series of strips from the strip. It, like, very much feels like Peanuts or Kathy or Garfield would do specials randomly sometimes, and that's what this feels like. It doesn't feel like someone went, how do we convert this into a show? It felt like, how this is what we have, make this into show. And I think that is ultimately the big difference. If I was a network or something, I do think it is funny. There's a lot of text in this explaining certain things. Sometimes can be funny, describing people, sometimes not. But it just doesn't feel like a fully fleshed out show. It just feels like people were taking moments like the comic strip and making it animated. But it, to me, felt like it needed more development. It didn't feel like it was done necessarily. And even the animation is, like, a little different. And I know, like, you could say now, well, we know the animation is different and you're just not accustomed to it. It just didn't feel like, it just felt like a first pass, and maybe they didn't recognize that, but it to me, it felt like they just didn't fully develop an episode around this concept. Whereas the first episode of the actual show is like, oh, they're in the neighborhood, it touches on the school thing, it touches on kids around the neighborhood, the concept of, like, the grandfather of Uncle Ruckus, stuff like that, how they feel about being in this white neighborhood. And this one, it's like, just like the grandpa with Billy Blanks is separate from the thing at the beginning, is separate from this, it's like, it's just so episodic. It just didn't feel all the way connected the way I think the show does, and the show's really good at, like, taking on, like, it feels like a plot and a theme, and it's written well. And it almost felt like in this, like, nobody had taken, like, a screenwriting course or, like, a storytelling class that was in media or outside of what comic strips were. I do think, like, under, like, what this is, it's actually pretty good. Like, if I had seen it at the time, I would probably like it, and I would be cool with the show doing this. But I think, like, that's not something audiences really like, and I can understand, like, a network's hesitation about something like this. It's also only 6 minutes. I always thought it was going to be a lot longer, but I do think maybe Fox could have been like, let's develop more. I do think it shows a lot of promise. It shows, like, this could be transitioned into a thing. It is weird that Huey's voice is done by Alicia Keys, supposedly, although I couldn't find that. I'm not sure what the source is on that, but I was like, okay, I mean, I guess not Regina King, but Alicia Keys. It seems weird because this was, like, during her peak time. Like, why would she voice a cartoon? Anyway, that just seems odd, but maybe she liked the Boondocks a lot. I don't know. I did like this, and as someone who read the comic strips and was really into it, I was happy with it. But I do think you could tell why it wasn't picked up. And why a network was like, I don't know about this, but I do think, like, showing it more patience and understanding what needed to be changed about it was like how a true interesting executive does it, and thus how Adult Swim has interesting smart executives who are like, well, this is a cool property that would work within our thing, and if we spend some time on it, we could have a different, unique show, which was the Boondocks was. And I don't think Fox had that executive at the time, and that's why Adult Swim got it and made it to what it was, and Fox only really got this and didn't really get anything. So I think that's sort of like the story of how the Boondocks landed where they are, and you sort of get another piece to understand how it all got that way.